Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Frank.
I'd like to thank the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, the riders, Doug Allen and his crew for this wonderful opportunity. I've been a very blessed guy all my career, pretty lucky to get nice horses to train for some wonderful people, and things just kind of fell into place for me, and I'm deeply appreciative of that.
How did you know that you even wanted to get into the horse industry?
Well, being a city boy, my parents, it was a tradition to go to the fairgrounds on Thanksgiving. And so I was a little bitty kid, they dragged me out there, and I was fascinated by the horses, and then we'd go home and have Thanksgiving dinner. And my grandfather actually was a bookmaker. I guess you're not supposed to say that, but in those years. So that was my only tie to the racing game. And although I don't bet, you know, I never did really, but so school and I really didn't, I'm kind of getting into my speech now for Saturday night, but school and I really didn't get along. And my dad bought me a $100 pony when I was in 6th grade, and that didn't work out very well. He was a great pony. I'd get on and ride him and fall off, and he'd stand there and look at me, and I'd get back on and try it again, you know. But, and moved on to a little better horse. My dad was an electrician, a small business guy in New Orleans, so you know, things, you know, we didn't have a lot of things, but with a couple of horses, I was wound up having a little success, and realized you couldn't eat all those ribbons and trophies that I was fortunate enough to win, and there was money at the racetrack if you would have a chance to succeed, and the race horses always intrigued me. So I went out there, and there was a guy named Jack Vanberg who was the leading trainer of America for a number of years, him and his father, and they raced in New Orleans, and gave me a job at the bottom cooling out the horses, and was fortunate enough to work my way up. It was definitely the school of hard knocks. It was no school, it was just how much barbed wire you could take every day. And worked my way up to being one of his assistants, and kind of went from there, you know.
So, jumping off on your own, jumping out with your own training business, how scary was that?
It was probably the most scariest thing in the world for me. I had an opportunity to go to California to train privately for a guy named Mike Rutherford, who had some nice horses. He was trying to hire me away from Jack. And a guy named Albert Stahl, Sr., who I was friends with and had horses with Jack, told me, don't go to California, I'll help you get started in the racing business, and help me with the wherewithal, and he helped me get started. But I was scared to death to leave the nest, to tell you the truth. You know, I'm sure anybody in business, when you go out on your own, it's a tough call, you know. And I was used to winning races, being around nice horses, and you know, felt like I was ready. But when you make that step, it's a big deal. You don't want to fail, you know. And that was probably one of the greatest things that drove me through the years is I was afraid to fail. Because you see a lot of trainers, and maybe in business, a lot of business and sports, you'll see people hit a little run, or they get to going good, and whether they forget about their business or whatever happens, and then you don't see them again. And I never wanted that to happen to me.
Your first run of success at Louisiana Downs was remarkable, 9 straight titles as a trainer. Talk about those years being working in Bossier City at that track at that time when it was really rocking.
Well, in those years, it was a place to be in Louisiana. It was actually better than the fairgrounds, mostly because of, on the weekends, you know, those people would pack in there, but it'd be all cars from Dallas, you know, from Texas. And they'd come over there to bet, and the purses were good, and it was a good place to be. And I was just, that's the first meet I won on my own, and I was just kind of fortunate to take off, and it just kind of snowballed, you know. But it was definitely a place to be there. And we went to Oaklawn some years, and you know, had some luck there also. And I'd actually kind of, as they say, winter in the fairgrounds. I was fortunate enough to do good at the fairgrounds, but I never did race all of the horses there. I'd kind of save them up for Louisiana Downs. It's changed now, you know, but that's, in those days, that was the place to be.
Talk about your Triple Crown experience, having won the Preakness at the Belmont, and reflect on this year's Triple Crown Championship.
Well, I'll tell you, the Derby is it's pretty hard to win. I was fortunate enough to run 3 horses in it. One was a horse called Dancel, who won the Arkansas Derby. And he was a tough little horse, and he was 4th in the Kentucky Derby, but he happened to run against Sunday Silence and Easy Goer, 2 really top-class horses. And he ran his heart out, and that's all you can ask of a horse. The next one came along was a horse called Hansel, who went on. He was the morning line favorite in the Derby. He'd won the 2 preps before the Derby, won the Preakness and the Belmont after the Derby, but you couldn't find him in the Derby. And and that just goes to show you how tough that race is to win. But he's a horse that had to have kind of things his own way. He didn't take to too much adversity, and it just it didn't work out for him in the Derby, but it worked out for him in the next 2. The next horse I had, Hansel was the morning line favorite. I had a horse called Pulpit, who was at Claiborne Farm. He was a homebred, probably the most brilliant horse I'd trained. Not the most accomplished. And he was the morning line favorite for the Derby, having won the Bluegrass 3 or 4 weeks before, and wound up 4th in the Derby, and he shattered his knee. Pulled up fine. He cooled out fine. I mean, he had some chips in his knee. He had surgery and never raced again. So he actually, nothing against the connections that won the Derby that year, but he was probably meant to be. He ran a good 4th, but got hurt in the race. But the Derby is pretty tough to win, but I was extremely thankful to win the Preakness and Belmont, to be able to win any of those races.
Other questions for Frank?
I have a question for you. It's 2-part. There's many athletes here, many coaches here, and I don't know if people know, but you're one of the premier bloodstock agents in the country. He buys horses now. That's what he does, and his record is pretty impeccable at buying horses to go on and do well. One, what do you look for in a horse? Is it like an athlete, like a coach? Do they look when they're recruiting an athlete? And 2, you probably saw in the flesh Secretariat, Seattle through those bunches, and how does American Pharaoh compare to those horses in your opinion?
You don't mind putting a guy on the spot, huh, Doug? Well, as far as the yearlings, it's like anything else. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You could talk for hours. Some people like to do the angles, the stride, the heart rate. All those things are tools, and I don't really use them. I just kind of use my experience that I've learned through the years. I think like a lot of good athletes, most of them have good balance. Most of them kind of go this way, but you've seen some of those fast guys that are towed in, they run like hell, So there's always exceptions to the rule, but I really think some people have an eye for a horse and some people don't, and I would classify myself as a work in progress, because I mean, yes, I have been fortunate enough to pick out some nice horses, but it's amazing the ones that don't make it for whatever reasons. So that's just part of the game, and that's easy. That's an easy thing to say. It's part of the game, but it always bothers me, because if I recommend a horse, then I expect him to be good, but it just doesn't work out that way. But balance is the big thing, and somewhat correct. They don't have to be perfect, but they have to be somewhat correct in their limbs. And as far as American Pharaoh, he's a brilliant top-class horse. He's in my mind, he's got it all. He's got speed, stamina. He's a very healthy horse. And he goes right to the lead, or lays right off the pace. He gets himself out of trouble. Usually he breaks quick, and he just brings the race to him. But he's got a tremendous stride, and he's fast, and he can keep going. And I think time will tell. There'll be a lot of discussions through the years, how he shapes up with the firm than Seattle Slew and those horses. Slew is probably more like American Pharaoh, and he had the speed also. A firm could come from pretty much anywhere, but he's go ahead.
Frank, 2 quick questions. One, you're going to ask Jake about why he threw interceptions. But also, with the success you've had and success that so many Louisiana jockeys have had nationally, how is the Louisiana racing industry looked at on the national level?
How is it looked at? Well, it's been up. The racing as a whole, it's probably been up and down through the years. It's probably on a little bit down spiral. Racing has been a little bit down in recent years, although I think it's going through a transition period. I mean, I think racing, they'll always have racing. there'll be top quality racing, and they'll have the smaller tracks, and there's nothing wrong with either one of them, but I think racing is just going to shrink a little bit. You're going to see racing for the weekends, 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3 days. Purses will be better. Hopefully there'll be more horses. We just can't stand. It just won't take 6 or 7 days of racing, around the country. It just doesn't have enough of that,
What about the jockeys that have come out of Louisiana?
Well, it's a shame because you can't get them to leave Louisiana. If you could get Jake to leave Louisiana, he'd be a hell of a trainer. You know what I mean? So, but the ones that have left have been very, very successful. Some of them are here in the Hall of Fame. But a lot of them and I understand that. As Jake and I were talking before, there's something to be said for staying home with your family. Like he races with his family, and they all live in the same area. My story would be that I would move 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. I've got no regrets. It's a way of life. I love it. But so there's something to be said for both things. But the jockeys, the ones that have left, have done great. But most of them, they don't realize how good they are. And they can compete against anybody, and it's been proven for many, many years, but you just got to get them to leave, that's all.
Do you have a favorite memory of your time racing in Louisiana, either the LAD or the fairgrounds?
Well, I'm forever grateful for the amount of races that we were able to win and the success we had, but I would say winning the Super Derby was, with the horse called Arch for Claiborne Farm, was a big plus for me, and I always wanted to win the Louisiana Derby, and I finally won it. I think one of the last years I'd raced down there for Claiborne Farm also, and it was a horse I was fortunate enough to pick out as a yearling for Claiborne, a horse called Mighty. So those are the 2 of the races in all the years that I that raced in Louisiana, wanted to try to win those races. I was fortunate enough to win a lot of races, but those I felt were the premier races to win here in Louisiana.
Frankie Brooks.